Welcome to the Unity in Humanity Interfaith Celebration 2024. We are so happy to have you joining us to listen to this year's speakers. My name is Jill Van Haren. I live in Delaware. This year, our presenters will be joining from South Africa, Colorado, Delaware, South Carolina, and Utah. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to gather together from across the globe in the comfort of our own homes. I love listening to each speaker share with us the treasures and the perspectives from their culture, religion, and relationship with divine. I also enjoy hearing how they discover the spiritual path they've chosen on this journey called life. This year's theme is peace and wisdom in action. Each year, I also ask the presenters to share their faith with us so we can listen with deep understanding of our oneness as humans and appreciate what they hold as sacred. Feel free to write your questions in the question box for the current speaker during their presentations. There's time for question and answer at the end of each talk. There's a chat box available for those who would like to use it. Please be sure to use it responsibly. There are a lot of differing beliefs being shared today. Please allow your hearts to be full of charity and become one in peace and friendship, having our hearts bound together in unity and love towards each other. To quote Bahai, who we will learn more about today, so powerful is the light of unity that it can illuminate the whole earth. The conference and speaker lineup will be as follows. The opening prayer will be given by Julia Rodriguez, our representative from the Bahai faith today. Our first speaker is Rabbi Kievman, followed by LJ Aaen, then Nimai Dāsa. Fourth will be Julia Rodriguez, and then Snuffer will speak last. LJ Aaen will close out the celebration with a Buddhist prayer for world peace. Julia, would you please unmute and start us off with a prayer?
I would be delighted. O thou kind Lord, thou hast created all humanity from the same stock. Thou hast decreed that all shall belong to the same household. In thy holy presence they are all thy servants, and all mankind are sheltered beneath thy tabernacle. All have gathered together at thy table of bounty. All are illumined through the light of thy providence. O thou kind Lord, thou hast provided for all, dost shelter all, conferrest life upon all. Thou hast endowed each and all with talents and faculties, and all are submerged in the ocean of thy mercy. O thou kind Lord, unite all, let the religions agree and make the nations one, so that they may see each other as one family and the whole earth as one home. May they all live together in perfect harmony. O God, raise aloft the banner of the oneness of mankind. O God, establish the most great peace. Cement thou, O God, the hearts together. O thou kind Father, God, gladden our hearts through the fragrance of thy love. Brighten our eyes through the light of thy guidance. Delight our ears with the melody of thy word, and shelter us all in the stronghold of thy providence. Thou art the mighty and powerful. Thou art the forgiving, and thou art the one who overlooketh the shortcomings of all mankind. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. That was beautiful. All right, I'll introduce our first speaker today. American born and raised Rabbi Kievman first came to South Africa for rabbinic training over 20 years ago and has stayed on since. He has a bachelor's in finance and economics, as well as various accreditations in subjects related to business, leadership, and rabbinics. He also holds a master's degree in education from the University of Middlesex in the UK. Currently, he is running and developing programs for the Young at Heart as director of the High Longevity Club, as well as serving the Jewish needs for business and tourists in the Sandton CBD area. He also serves as a chaplain for various senior living centers and as a volunteer medic. Welcome, Rabbi Kievman. Thank you so much for joining in from across the world. I know many people today are excited to hear from you.
Thank you, Jill, for organizing this incredible event here today. And I'm glad to be part of it all the way from South Africa. But as you can tell, my accent is still American. You can take the boy out of America, but you can't take America out of the boy. So here I am. And I'm very grateful to be here with you, coming from the holiest day of the year on the Jewish calendar, known as Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And I was thinking, what would be the appropriate topic of discussion to share? And I thought nothing less than what you call today, this day of unity and humanity, of interfaith celebration. And I thought I'd share some Jewish perspectives on that. So first of all, it's just incredible to be with this wonderful group of people you've gathered, and everyone else who's joining from around the world to be part of this. I think in today's day and age, we need a lot more of this cultural awareness and synthesis. And I'm privileged to be sharing with you that Jewish perspective. So I thought I would share a little bit of an overview, in a sense, of some elements of Jewish culture that would help you understand what the Jewish culture is like. So I chose 6 topics, if I can only even get through all 6 of them. The 6 topics being kosher, Shabbos, holidays, prayer, birth, and end of life. But I don't know if we'll get to all of these. But in the meantime, first I thought it's important we address this topic even in general about unity and humanity, because it's just so important that we better understand each other and to just get along better in society. It's so necessary considering the state of affairs in the world today. So that's the first thing that I think is so important. And Jill, we see your passion for this shining through in everything you've done to create this day of cultural awareness and interfaith celebration. Love that terminology. And the first and obvious reason to emphasize for today is that we understand and appreciate each other better when we know that we're not just different people walking in a world together, but rather when we understand a little bit and appreciate of one another's values and morals and what makes us tick. I think that just puts us in a much better setting in this world. And, besides for that, Judaism itself gives several insights that make this whole idea of cultural awareness and interfaith appreciation and understanding particularly important to me. You see, in Judaism, we believe that our cultural distinctions are actually part of the divine plan. God wanted humanity to form into distinct cultural groupings. Even within Jewish society that I'm representing here today, we have many different expressions of Jewish culture. We have so many different streams and ways of practicing Judaism. I would say in general, if you want to put it into a nutshell, all of society, 7-8 billion of us, every single person is unique. Every single person is indispensable to the divine plan for this world. And when we could appreciate the distinct and unique role that we each play, and that we were all born originals. Nobody has to die a copy of anyone else. Everyone else is taken. So by definition, we realize that not only is each person uniquely distinct and different, but to realize we have our cultural distinctions. And that's God's desire that humans spread across the globe to share and to be shining superstars that we all are, by sharing each other what we each uniquely have, and we could all share with the world. And I think that all boils down ultimately into the divine human core, that we're all created in that divine image. And in that sense, we're not different. We're all unique. In fact, Judaism says, the Bible says, I'm sure everyone believes, we're all created in the divine image. Well, I look here at this robust group. We all have different images. We all have different looks and features. So what's the divine image? And that's our soul. And we're all created in that divine image. So there's a sense among Jews that learning about and respecting other people's cultures and having that tolerance and appreciation for one another, that actually shows respect for God's plan that humanity develop into these cultural distinctions that we all are. In fact, what comes to my mind is a beautiful, there's a story in the Talmud about a rabbi, a great rabbi. And this rabbi once encountered a fellow who he criticized this man for being ugly. And of course, it seems quite strange that a rabbi is going to comment on a person's facial features. So the truth is, the commentaries say he wasn't talking about his external representation, but rather internally, this person was ugly, his characteristics, his personality. But be it as it may, what stands out to me more was the response of that person. Because this person said, "You're calling me ugly? Well, why don't you go to the craftsman who made me and tell him how ugly is this vessel that you made?" In other words, I think when we fail to respect an element of creation, whether it's a person or a culture or anything else, it's not just an affront to that thing, but it's also a disrespect to God. God willed this facet of life into being. God did not create us all looking the same, and we don't have to all think the same. We all have different ways of seeing things. And Jill, it's to your credit that you bring it all together here today. And perhaps there's a deeper layer even of understanding of this story, because this man's reply to the rabbi, go to the craftsman and look at me from his perspective, from the divine perspective. If you gaze at me with the perspective of the divine, you are going to notice my inherent beauty, that I am also indispensable for this world. Every person who's created matters. So what seemed ugly or dissonant will just be different. When we see things from God's perspective, the ugly thing is no longer ugly. Every single person and every single culture has a role to play. So that's a point that came to my mind. Another point is that Judaism believes that it's our job to actually partner with God in creating his world, which means that it's our job to work together to better our world until it reflects God's ultimate vision. And what this practically means is that we need to work together in mutual respect to make the world a more loving, a more peaceful place, which, Jill, this is exactly what you're achieving here today. If we all treat each other's needs with the same enthusiasm that we apply to our own needs, then no doubt the world would quickly become a happier, a healthier, and a more peaceful, loving place to live in. And so I think it's in this context that we need to work to build bridges between cultures so that we can respect the distinctions, the differences that make us unique, and learn from each other, because there is so much that we could learn from one another. In Ethics of Our Fathers, which is a great work of Jewish teachings, it says, who is a wise person? One who learns from everyone. There's something we can learn from every single person, especially from someone who's different than myself. So I'm looking forward to learn from every single one of the presenters today. And I feel privileged that you gave me the opportunity to speak first. Even as we appreciate the similarities that make us the same, I think there's so much that we could gain from each other's differences. And, you know, from this perspective, like I intend to share with you a little bit about Jewish observance. So when the next time you encounter a Jewish person, you just have a more sensitive understanding and appreciation of the basics. So I think it's so important, because the human, in a sense, we're this amalgam of body and soul, every one of us. And therefore, understanding our spiritual needs, we could perhaps be more in tune with each other's physical needs, and hopefully the world could be a more peaceful place where we all get along with one another and just have a little bit more appreciation and understanding of one another. So that's why I chose these topics, because kosher, every time you might break bread with a fellow Jew, you want the Jewish person, if they're observant, if they're religious, even an irreligious Jew knows about kosher. So it's important that I share with you a little bit about that. Shabbos, or Shabbat, depending how you want to pronounce it, is our day of rest. I thought I'd share with you a few insight about that and our Jewish holidays, a little bit about prayer, and if we could get to some ideas about, the role of a rabbi. They say is hatch, match, and dispatch. So I thought I'd cover all those areas and aspects if we have time for them. But the most important thing, I think, in general, about all cultures is it's important to ask. There's no way that we could become fully competent in any culture or any area of life in a single session. And there's no doubt that in today's short presentation I'm going to give you, we're not going to have enough time to touch on everything about Judaism, or even on these points that I want to highlight. it's impossible to cover everything. Even with these specific areas, I don't think we're gonna, it's just gonna be very basic. So no matter how comprehensive a session might be, it just paints a picture in these broad strokes. But most important, I think, is that if you have questions and we wonder about the differences of other cultures, best thing to do is ask questions. So I open the floor to anyone who has questions. Feel free to put them in the chat box or in the Q&A. I don't know which one's better, whichever one. And I'm happy to take your questions at the end of my presentation. Jill, you'll tell me when my time is up. Unfortunately, sometimes I have a tendency to keep on talking and talking. So just tell me it's time to wrap it up, and I'll do so obligingly, no doubt. And just thought that these are some topics that I'll talk about. So let's launch right in. A little joke comes to my mind of a Jew from a small town comes back one day from a big city that he went to visit. So somebody asks him, tell me about your visit to the big city. He says, well, I went to the big city, and there I met a Jew who had grown up very religious, and he knew so much of Jewish law and everything you ever wonder about Jewish teachings, the Bible, the Talmud, you name it. And he says, then I met another Jew who was an atheist, and I met a Jew who owned a large, big company with many employees, and I met a Jew who was very poor, and I met a Jew who was a communist, and I met a Jew who was a capitalist, and I met a Jew who was this, that, the other. So the other fellow asks him, he says, I don't understand you. We have all these types of Jews in our town too. So the guy says, no, you don't understand. This is all the same Jew. The same Jew is all of those. So the first thought that comes to my mind in that sense is, you may have encountered one type of Jew or another type of Jew. There are so many of us. We're so few in the world, but at the same time, we all come in different colors and in different personalities and different levels of observance. So the first thing to know is that, and I would imagine the same applies to any other religion that is being represented here today or any other faith. It's the way it goes, and that's why it's important to ask, and that's the only way we can actually learn. In Judaism, we believe that the only bad question is the question that isn't asked. Asking is a very important part. Another teaching from ethics of our fathers is one who's ashamed doesn't learn. We can't learn when we're embarrassed. In fact, the very opening statement in the book of Jewish law, which interesting is called a set table, and the Hebrew word for Jewish law is called halacha, which also means to walk, because wherever we go, this body of Jewish law guides a Jew on how to live their life. And it says there that we cannot be embarrassed of people who mock us. So the very basic of one who's ashamed doesn't learn is basically telling us that if we're embarrassed to ask questions because we fear somebody's going to make fun, we feel we might be humiliated or insulted by asking, we're just going to remain ignorant. So the best thing to do is, whatever I don't know about, let me ask. And it's important that we do ask these questions, because when we ask, that's the way we learn. And knowing that we can't cover all of Judaism in one single session here today, and knowing that no doubt whatever I say today is certainly going to trigger more questions. So I'm stating straight up. And Jill, if you want to share my details afterwards, if anyone wants to ask me questions, or certainly they could go into a reputable website online, such as our organization, Chabad.org, where you can find answers to so many of your questions about Jewish culture, about the Jewish religion in general, and no doubt you'll find a lot of answers to your questions there. So let me launch into the first topic I thought about talking about, and that is kosher. Are you familiar with kosher? Oh, somebody's asking to tell us about today's holiday. So actually, yesterday was a Jewish holiday. Yesterday's holiday was called Yom Kippur. It's a day of a day of atonement. And I'm going to get to that in a moment, because I put that in my presentation, I think, as the third section. So we'll get to that in a moment. Okay. Was there another question that popped up on the screen? I'll take a look at all of the questions as they come forward. And thank you for your point about my energy. I appreciate that. It's good to have good energy. But I'll look at the questions after I talk about each topic that I wanted to discuss, just so that I could focus on the particular topic that's going on. I thought it's always good to begin with food, because firstly, in Jewish culture, food is always present, except for yesterday's holiday. That was a fast day. We didn't eat for 25 hours, no food, no drink. So otherwise, generally speaking, food is something that probably connects and bonds a lot of people. So I think that's worthwhile to talk about the kosher diet. Now, have you ever encountered, I wonder if you ever met with other Jewish people who are particular about the food items? Now, besides for cultural Jewish food, there are actually laws related to how we eat, what we eat, etc. So I think it's important that I just address that. Some background about kosher, why this diet is important to any Jew. What does kosher even mean? The word kosher literally means fit. So you might hear the word kosher in other contexts where people talk about behavior. Is it befitting behavior? That's also relative to the word kosher. But generally, when it comes to food, what does it mean that food is kosher? Some people think it means it's blessed by a rabbi. No, it might be supervised by a rabbi or even anyone who's familiar with the laws of kosher dietary specifications. So let's talk about that. Foods that are prepared in accordance with many and intricate laws within Judaism that cover every food category and every aspect of its preparation. So if it's kosher, then it's fit for consumption. That means I could eat it only if it's kosher. That could either be a rabbi supervising the production of the food to ensure that it's prepared in accordance with the laws of Judaism, obviously being a large part of humans' daily experience. We all like to eat. So our choice of what to eat and when to eat is oftentimes governed by impulse. And that's a major distinction between an animal's behavior and a human's behavior. If we crave a burger and I just want to eat the burger now, if I want vegetables, whatever I want to eat it. And if we can't have what we want, I'm going to be disappointed and I might be grumpy and grouchy. And well, Judaism teaches that our mind has to control our heart, our intellect to control our emotions. So we have to govern our impulses rather than being governed by them. And this is one reason why the Bible, Torah, legislated an entire set of laws that pertain to the whole gamut of the food that we eat. And the goal is to infuse this otherwise animalistic experience with mindfulness. So one famous example of a kosher directive is the Jewish tradition that tells us to eat bacon and shellfish. You might be familiar with that. But to get a little bit more specific, maybe meat and chicken actually have to be slaughtered and prepared in a very specific manner. And these are just a few examples. But the common denominator by all these laws is that they teach us and empower us to forge the strength and discipline to control our emotions rather than being controlled by them. And it's a very, very important part of the Jewish culture. We all know that our material desires are by nature very potent. And that's, obviously our material desires precede our intellect. Think about it. Our physical pleasures are ingrained into our natures from the beginning of life. We grow up with these primal tendencies and they influence us. The extent of our intellect, which is a faculty that is central to the purpose of our existence, but it's something that without food, without our basic primal needs, we can't survive. So obviously we need those, but we also need to govern, we need to control and discipline that within ourselves. Another reason is that our material desires are strengthened by us being in a material environment. We're constantly, we have our physical needs, whether it's for our gadgets, whether it's for food. And the more we capitulate or concede to our physical material desires, the more they control us. And on the other hand, our intellect is a spiritual entity of the spiritual world, and it feels like a stranger in our coarse material environment. Right? It finds no assistance from the material physical environment in which we reside. Everything is said as stacked against it. So it's to be expected that our material desires might weaken and overpower our intellect, both because the material desire precedes the intellect and because they are assisted by the environment in which we live, which is very materialistic. And that's why Jewish law requires that we strengthen our intellect and weaken our material desires, which perhaps goes back to the question about this holiday that we just observed. That was a 25-hour fast, right? We are given laws within Judaism, certain times that we fast, or we have laws that forbid us from just eating any foods, and not just regarding food. Think about it. Every sexual act is controlled within Jewish law. We have laws that dictate when we pray, and that we give part of our income to charity and other acts of kindness. It's all in order to weaken the power of our primal desires and to focus that our mind will control our desires. You could say it's mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. So this is something, in fact, in the Bible it says, sanctify yourself and you will be holy. And our sages long ago in the Talmud, which is the basic work of the commentary on the Bible, tells us sanctify yourself. That refers to when you follow God's command, you will be holy, meaning that through following God's commandments, the power of our material desires are weakened, and the influence of the intellect, for which we're created, is strengthened. So it's not about depriving ourselves from our physical desires. We're allowed to eat, and we're allowed to have good food, and there's plenty of delicious kosher food. I'm sure you've seen plenty of overweight Jews. I myself am struggling with my own weight and got to work on it. It's not that you can't eat, but it's about controlling the way we eat. In fact, Judaism advocates bringing sanctity to activities that are otherwise mundane. So a healthy and balanced diet, in my mind, is a cookie in both hands. Not just kidding. It's critical to the health and well-being of our bodies, is having a spiritual well-being as well, having that in check. So it's about elevating our eating experience to something that's sacred, something that's sublime. And the framework of a kosher diet, it transforms our meal into a holy platform that serves God, that I'm not just serving myself. It's not narcissistic when I'm eating. When we choose to eat only those dishes that are supported by the kosher diet, then our mundane meal becomes a holy experience because it allows God into this important area of human life. So thereby, we inject holiness into what would otherwise be a mundane experience. So let me just share a few thoughts about that, and I'll take your questions here. Number one, here's a basic overview of the laws of kosher, and I'll get right on to your questions. First thing is that certain animals, birds, fish, and insects, or their derivatives, are not allowed to be consumed. Okay, so that's just putting it basically out there. Animals and birds that may be consumed, they have to be prepared in a very specific manner. And so that is the second point about kosher food. Number three, we don't eat milk and meat together. It may sound like only a few laws, but within each of these laws, there's a host of a lot of details within this that I don't have the time to go into each of the intricate details. But the point that I make is that obviously everything we do should be governed by our intellect and infusing it with the spirituality. In fact, before we even eat, what we do is we say a blessing on the food. So we become mindful before we're eating, who provided me with all my needs? And I think it's important to have that mindfulness before we partake of the physical, before we indulge. Another way of looking at it is, if I'm uplifting the food by saying a blessing, and I realize that I'm not just eating to indulge and have my own, just for my own pleasure and animalistic needs, but rather because I need that energy to fulfill my divine purpose, my mission in this world, well, I'm elevating the food to a higher purpose. Same could be said to why I'm exercising. I go to the gym because I need to be healthy in order to fulfill the divine purpose that God put me into this world. Of course, there's a lot more to kosher than I've shared with you here, but that's just a short example. At the end of the day, when you, with kosher food, there's a lot of other laws, and I'm happy to take any questions in that regard right now. So I'm going to just take a look at the Q&A and then at the chat and see what questions have come through. Jill, how do you want to do with questions? Do you want to read them aloud, or should I just read them and respond?
You can go ahead and take a look at them and respond.
Okay, great. So Cameron, thank you for you wrote, you love my energy. Thank you. Thanks for pointing out that we should embrace our unique cultures indeed. In your understanding, does God intend to eventually unify mankind under one spiritual understanding or government, or is the variety of mankind and religious ideas meant to be maintained? I think that diversity is part of the intention. I don't know for certain. I think there's going to be a conglomeration, a kind of synthesis of both, because in the great prophets and scriptures, it does talk about a time when all the world will be united and recognizing one God, creator of heaven and earth, which monotheism is a basic tenet of Jewish faith. So I think it would be a synthesis of these two ideas. On the one hand, where everyone would come to acknowledge or recognize one God, creator of all of heaven and earth, but at the same time, I think that diversity is something that's intended in order for us to appreciate one another. Angels might be single and the same, but that's part of the beauty and diversity of humanity, is that each of us is unique and created in our own beautiful, indispensable way to this world. So thank you for that, Cameron. The next question I see here from Vaughn, and that is, with Yom Kippur originally having been directly tied to ceremonial activities in the temple in Jerusalem, how does Judaism today generally regard the need for a proper temple complex in order to observe this day? That is a great question. And while we no longer have our temple, which was destroyed 1,950 something years ago, 54 years ago, the year 70 of the Common Era, today, first of all, every synagogue has a mini temple. And secondly, each person, Jew, Gentile, wherever we are in the world, we create our own mini temple. We bring God's presence to wherever we are in the world. God always has a place for us, and we always have to feel God's presence wherever we are. So obviously, without the temple, we no longer have the same ritual and ceremonial practices as were done in the times of the temple, but we certainly read about it, and we try to emulate it and replicate it in certain ways. So to give you just two examples, firstly, today, prayer takes the place of sacrifice. But the Hebrew word for sacrifice is karban. And many words in Hebrew have multiple meanings. So the etymology of karban is karav, which means to come close. And in my mind, I developed this thought that if I want to come close to someone, yesterday my wife and I celebrated our 17th wedding anniversary. But from 18 years ago when I met her, in order for us to cultivate our relationship, in order for us to go on dates, I had to sacrifice time from my studies, from work, whatever it was. So it requires sacrifice to cultivate a relationship. Whether it's in work or family, you have to sacrifice, just like the sacrifice in the temple. The whole purpose of a sacrifice was that I'm going to sacrifice my animals, which probably them being a more agricultural world, it's not something we could relate to as much today, but that was a major currency of the time, 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. So people sacrificed their animal to come closer to God. And in that sense, I think we could sacrifice our animalistic tendencies to come closer. But that's not the ultimate relationship. That is just cultivating a relationship. When you sacrifice, you get closer, whether it's sacrificing time, money, beliefs, whatever it might be. The ultimate relationship is actually that is an intimate relationship. And that requires a lot more than sacrifice. It's an inextricable bond that comes from the next level after you've sacrificed and gotten close to each other. Only a husband and wife can appreciate the intimacy of this inseparable and inextricable relationship that they have. And that's ultimate relationship every human being can have with God. And on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, was the one day a year where the high priest back in the times of the temple would enter the Holy of Holies, the holiest space on the holiest day, by who was considered the holiest person, took place on that day. And the truth is, this is the holiest moment for every single one of us. Every moment is precious, and we have to really, really, really tap into every moment that we have. So I hope that answers your question. I see another question from, I hope I don't mispronounce your name, Caden, with regards to disciplining the appetite, the passions under reason, or the intellect. Do you have restrictions on media digital consumption? I know some Jews and Orthodox Christians refrain from technology on their Sabbath. If so, how does this better unify your community? That's a great question. And the answer to that is absolutely yes. First of all, in general, not only about the Sabbath. So yes, for 24 or 25 hours, every Friday from sunset until the stars are out on Saturday, we don't use any technology. If I need a light on in my room, I'll turn it on before the Sabbath begins, or I'll have a timer switch to ensure that any technology. We don't cook food. It's actually a biblical commandment not to light any fires on the Sabbath. I won't go into all the laws of the Sabbath, although that was my next topic, Shabbos, as we pronounce it in our Ashkenazic, or I'm originally from European extraction, so that's the way we pronounce it. There's different ways we pronounce Hebrew words, and we don't use any technology in those days in the sense of activating them for usage. So firstly, answering your question, whether it comes to food or any of the passions and desires, including technology, I won't use my phone or computer. In fact, Jill was sending me messages last week on the holiday, probably not realizing that it took me 48 hours, or rather last week was a whole weekend. It started Wednesday evening and it ended on Saturday night, because we had 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, which is 48-hour holiday, and went straight into the Sabbath. So there you had 72 hours of no digital involvement, and that's certainly a blessing from on high. I think there's a reason why we call these cell phones, because we sometimes are like in a cell, so glued to them, myself included. So it's good to have that detox once a week, and I encourage everyone to somehow or other inculcate that in your own life. It's a good way to go. So I hope that answers your question. Next question from Cecil in Texas. We're from Texas as a child. I don't know why, but we never ate milk and meat together. Is there a health reason for that? So that's a great question, Cecil. And I've seen some recent articles saying that there are some health benefits to them. I don't know what those health benefits are or aren't. But the reason we observe it as religious practicing Jews is irregardless of the health benefits that there are. And there certainly are, as I saw some scientific articles discussing the health benefits of them, which I don't remember offhand what they are. But those are side benefits. They're fringe benefits. If you might notice, some Orthodox Jews, we have these little spaghetti strings coming out of the side of our pants. These are things that remind us. It's a biblical commandment to be reminded about the commandments all the time. So we wear a garment called tzitzit, and it, so it was only a little joke. I was talking about the fringe benefits. If there are benefits, that's wonderful. But we do it strictly because God says so, and it's a biblical commandment, and that's why we observe it. The next question, thank you for Matt about my temperament. I appreciate that. Next, I like the idea of cooking in each hand. Thank you. Next one, I love the idea of injecting holiness into the mundane. Absolutely, we all must do that wherever we can. I understand that regarding sea life, we should not eat anything without fins. Yes, when it comes to, I didn't get into all the details of it, but if you want, we could certainly look at a few aspects of that, of what defines a kosher fish. When it comes to meat, it has to be an animal that chews its cud, has split hooves, and is also slaughtered in a particular way. And therefore, kosher meat, for example, would have certain packaging, and it has to be, the packaging has to be completely sealed until until I buy it and open it up. I might be on a plane. If you ever see Jewish passengers on an airplane are going to get served a kosher meal, just like vegetarian passengers or halal Muslim passengers are going to get their halal meal. And I'm sure there's many others out there of different options that the airlines offer. And you'll notice that when it comes to kosher and possibly the others, possibly for non-contamination or whatever other reasons it might be. But when it comes to kosher meat, there's a specific law. And I have to tell you an incredible story. A friend of mine was flying once on a plane. He was actually quite hungry. His meal came. And when his meal came, he realized before we eat, part of Jewish law requires we actually have to wash our hands in a ritual manner, as was done in our ancient temple. So we go to a sink to wash. And of course, he has to go across his fellow passengers. And he goes to wash his hands. And then he realized, you remember, there's a Jewish law that says when you have a kosher meat, again, this law doesn't pertain to my own home, because in my home, I'm only bringing kosher meat. But when I'm in an environment where there might be other meat around that's not necessarily kosher, once the packaging has been opened and it hasn't been supervised, we don't eat it, because it has to be monitored to make sure that it's kosher meat. My friend says he comes back to his place and he remembered that law, and he decided not to eat his sandwich. The guy next to him says, "Hey, buddy, why aren't you eating your sandwich?" He says, "No, I'm not hungry." And the guy's like, "No, I saw you salivating there. I know you're hungry." He says, "No, I'm not in the mood." The guy says, "Tell me why you're not eating." He says, "Well, it might sound peculiar and strange to you, but there is a Jewish law that dictates that if the food hasn't been supervised, if it's regarding kosher meat and the sealed packaging has been broken, then I can't eat it if that's the case." The guy says, your laws are unbelievable, because I always wondered what these kosher meals that are served earlier are about. And I saw you got like a meat sandwich and I got a meat sandwich. So I decided, let me see what the kosher meat sandwich is like. So while you left your seat, I quickly tasted your meat and it tasted good. I wanted some more. Then I realized you're going to come back to your seat and there won't be meat. So I put my meat into yours. And he said, you see, I understand now why Jewish law requires this. So there are certain laws within Judaism, whether we understand them or not, they're for good reason and they're for good purpose. So back to your question about sea life, we only eat fish that have fins and scales. There's plenty of delicious fish, from salmon to sea bass to yellowtail to you name it. There's plenty of good fish that have fins and scales. So no, we won't eat prawn or lobster or any other shellfish and many other, seafood that if they don't have fins and scales, we can't eat them. Of course, they also have to be prepared in a kosher kitchen, because if there might be other utensils that have been used to prepare food that isn't kosher, we can't eat them. So thanks for that question. I hope that clarifies what you asked. Next, I see it from Jeff. Mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter, is an elegant way to explain how we know whether we're in the right mindset towards something physical. Absolutely. Jill, do you want me to go on to the next topics, or have I overused my time already?
I would love you to, but unfortunately we've gone over time.
Okay.
Though I was thinking, I think there's 90 people here right now who would probably really like to hear what else you have to say. So just out of curiosity, would you be willing to maybe come back again here soon if I scheduled something so that we could hear the rest of your presentation?
Sure, we could do this anytime. Or as I said, there's plenty available online, and I figured better to over prepare, and I don't get to everything than to under prepare. So that's what I did, and I hope it went over well.
That was great. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Really wonderful. Thank you.
I can't wait to hear what the other presenters have to share as well. Although I am a paramedic, so if any emergencies come through, I'm on duty tonight, then I might have to depart in that case. But I'll stay tuned and hope that we don't get any emergencies to pull me away.
Thank you. Okay, wonderful. Our next guest is LJ Aaen. LJ has been a Buddhist meditation teacher for over 15 years. She began her journey in the Kadampa Buddhist tradition to find peace and meaning in her busy life as a mother and engineer. She quickly entered the special teacher training program and completed the study of all the main Mahayana Buddhist texts. She has taught at the Kadampa meditation centers in Phoenix and London and is now teaching in Denver, Colorado. LJ has found meaning in her Buddhist practice and study and loves sharing the teachings with all who will listen. Welcome, LJ. Thank you so much for joining us in this interfaith celebration. Having been to the Kadampa meditation centers in Baltimore and DC and finding profound beauty in the Buddhist teachings, I'm grateful that you are sharing some of this wisdom with us today.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very, very happy to share some of the Buddhist teachings. And also thank you for your interest and your open hearts in listening. So I'm a Kadampa meditation teacher, which means that I study and practice Kadampa Buddhism, which is part of the new Kadampa tradition. And Kadampa means somebody who takes all Buddha's teachings as personal advice and puts them into practice in daily life. And so when I heard about the title of this conference being Peace and Wisdom in Action, I thought this is exactly what Kadampas do. We put all of our teachings, all of our practice into action and try to better ourselves and help everyone else at the same time. And so this tradition, the Kadampa tradition, is an unbroken lineage of Buddhist teachings from master to master from the time of Buddha. And everything that I will say in this very short talk comes from this tradition and comes from these Buddhist masters. Some of the names are Atisha, is the founder of Kadampa tradition, old Kadampa tradition. Jason Kappa, who's the founder of the New Kadampa tradition, and other lineage gurus like Jijin Rinpoche and Geshe Kelsang Gyatso Rinpoche, who is my root guru, my teacher. And so what I was hoping to present today is Buddha's teachings on our Buddha nature, and a brief introduction as to how we realize this Buddha nature. So Buddha's first teaching, the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, was the Four Noble Truths, in which Buddha explained essentially four things. He said you should know suffering, you should abandon origin, you should attain cessation, and you should practice the path. And the very essence of this is that we need to understand that each and every living being suffers in the same ways, and that we suffer from life to life to life to life to life. And that the origin of all of that suffering, this infinite suffering over incalculably long periods of time, is our delusions, our states of mind like anger, uncontrolled desire, grasping, self-grasping, ignorance, these states of mind that are disturbing, painful, and very importantly, are distorted states of mind, the mind that disconnect us from reality. I think we clearly know that when we become angry, we become disconnected from everything that's going on. So very briefly, the delusions like anger, uncontrolled desire, jealousy, miserliness, greed, these are delusions that disturb our mind and cause us to behave in uncontrolled and harmful manner. And so that these delusions are our enemies, that we don't have any enemies who have arms and legs. No living being is our enemy, but our own delusions are enemies. And that through practicing a spiritual path, we can completely cease all of our suffering. So in a very, very brief way, these are the Four Noble Truths. And so what I wanted to discuss with you is that sort of these Four Noble Truths, they stand on the ground of this understanding that each and every living being inside them has Buddha nature, this indestructible, infinite potential to completely cease their own suffering and to attain a state of enlightenment, attain a state in which we can help each and every living being every day. And so that our very nature is this purity, this potential for infinite unconditional love, infinite omniscient wisdom, that this abides at the heart of each and every living being. And so this is not abstract, actually. It's not an abstract idea, and we can very practically in our daily life connect with this. And then when we connect with our Buddha nature, then we find it very easy then to connect to everybody else's Buddha nature. And then our relationships massively transform. So I said Buddha nature is not abstract. So for example, anybody who's done or tried even a little bit of meditation, what they've noticed is that maybe just breathing meditation is quite common nowadays. People do some meditation in various spiritual practices. When our mind quiets down even just a little bit, when this incessant flow of distracting thoughts subsides, this very deep and natural peace and contentment naturally arise from within. So if we subside even temporarily just through breath, nothing complicated, although there are many, many meditations, but just breath, our mind becomes a little bit more still. And so what we find is that without having done anything external, our mind has become more peaceful, and then we become more happy, more content. It is said, and many people know this now in various spiritual traditions, that just meditating 10 or 15 minutes every day sets us up for a more peaceful, a more content, more loving experience in our day. And so how does this relate to our Buddha nature? Well, this shows us that actually the nature of our mind, all levels of mind, including our very subtle mind, the deepest level that goes from life to life, the nature of our mind is actually peace. I know that in our neurotic world, we don't necessarily think of ourselves as naturally peaceful person, but because our mind is naturally peaceful, this shows us that if we have wisdom methods to keep our mind peaceful throughout the day through wisdom ways of thinking, then we will eventually be peaceful and happy all the time, and then continue be able to help each and every living being accomplish that same state. And so analogy is given of a dirty water. So if you have a glass of dirty water, the nature of the water is actually pure. Like water is always H2O. The water is always pure, but is polluted with various impurities. And these impurities can be removed from the water. So although the impurities pollute the water itself is always pure. Even the dirty water retains in it a potential to be pure. And so in similar way, our mind is naturally pure, naturally loving, naturally compassionate, but through generating the thoughts of anger, frustration, jealousy, uncontrolled desire, the craving, these states of mind, they pollute our mind, making it unpeaceful, disturbed, and making us very, very happy. Sometimes so unhappy, sometimes extremely unhappy. And so just like pollution can be removed from water, the delusions, so the origins of our suffering, can be removed. And so what that means for each and every one of us is that anytime we experience any sense of peace that is showing us this very pure potential that we have in our hearts, potential for permanent inner peace, potential for unconditional love for all living beings, for omniscient wisdom. And that if we engage in the spiritual path, we'll be able to remove bit by bit these impurities from our mind, because our mind functions on a habit. And so by removing the causes and the habits of anger or jealousy, for example, we can eventually remove them completely once and for all, so that they never arise again. And so when we need to see this in ourselves. We need to, through some meditation, through some contemplation, see this pure potential, and then start to identify with the potential. And so another analogy that is helpful is that Buddha said that our Buddha nature is like a gold nugget buried in dirt. And it doesn't matter how horrible person's delusions and behaviors are, which would be dirt, inside their heart, they have this indestructible gold Buddha nature. And so we can then start to see that in ourselves. And so by understanding that anger arises, the jealousy arises, we learn about these states of mind, we learn how to interfere with their development, but we never identify with them. And we start to more and more over time in our practice identify with this Buddha nature. So one way that we can practice that is, for example, when anger arises, instead of thinking I am an angry person or I am angry, where we take anger and we take ourselves and kind of smush it together in one lump. So instead of saying I am angry, we can say there is anger temporarily arising in my mind. There's an enormous difference between saying I am angry and I have a mind, and in my mind temporarily there is anger arising like dirt. And so this kind of using words of wisdom to properly describe our situation, causes us then to see that we can get rid of anger without harming our mind. And I know in one way that sounds a little bit silly, but you know, well, sometimes when we're angry and think, oh, I'm so angry, and somebody says, let's go meditate, and then we feel like even more threatened because it feels like they're not like seeing us, they're not respecting us, when in reality somebody's trying to help us to get rid of this sort of this enemy of delusion, which is in our own mind. And so it's like when we say I'm angry and somebody says, okay, let's get peaceful, we're like, how like which part of me do I need to cut off in order to get rid of that anger? You see, because with our view, we have identified with our anger. But not only that is not helpful in getting rid of anger, but it's not actually correct. It's not actually true that we are our anger. We have a mind. Yeah, you are not your mind. And our mind temporarily, due to various causes and conditions, generates anger. It's a dirt. And so just like we have no problem washing the dirt off of our clothes, we develop this idea that we want to get rid of our anger, get rid of our jealousy, get rid of our greed, get rid of our miserliness, just like getting rid of the dirt. And we're not identifying with it. We just think seeing it is something that is problematic and that needs to go. And identify with our pure nature, identify with the gold, and keep getting rid of the dirt. When we see that very clearly in ourselves, it becomes very easy for us to see everyone else in exactly the same way. So instead of focusing on people's delusions, people's negative actions, and getting distracted and causing our own negativity, our own anger by observing somebody else's bad behavior, we then focus on the gold of their Buddha nature in their heart. And of course, we don't become stupid. It's not like we suddenly don't observe that they are misbehaving, but we see that we are identifying them with their Buddha nature. And then through our actions, it is so much easier then to become patient and compassionate and loving and kind and help them with their negativity, help them with their negative actions. If we kind of mush together a person and their delusions, seeing them as a horrible person, which is, by the way, what anger does. When we are angry, we see another person as an intrinsically horrible person and therefore generate anger. And then there's like this feedback mechanism between us seeing a horrible person and getting more angry. It's not a realistic situation. It's not what's actually going on, and it's certainly not helpful. You know, it's like that saying, nobody in the history of the universe has calmed down by being yelled at to calm down. And so when we can see others' Buddha nature, we don't get distracted by their delusions, and then we help them, always help them. It's always so much easier to become compassionate when you see people through their pure potential. And so this is not only kind of the baseline of Buddha's teachings, because Buddha taught out of compassion for us to completely cease our own suffering. That was the whole purpose, is that he found the way, he showed us the way about what their problem was, our delusions, and how to get rid of them once and for all. And so not only that this provides kind of as like a baseline for attaining enlightenment, but it's a very baseline of having a peaceful life. This wisdom is a baseline for having a peaceful life, because through identifying with our pure potential, we're able to be kind, we're able to be compassionate, we're able to be peaceful. And then we turn our eyes towards others and want to help them as well. And it turns out that the very best way, and the most powerful way to attain our own peace is to wish for the happiness of others. So these are the basis for Mahayana teachings. And so Buddhist Master Shantideva, he said, all the happiness there is in the world arises from wishing others to be happy, and all the suffering there is in the world arises from wishing ourselves to be happy. And so the way that we actualize this Buddha nature, bring it to fruition, is then realizing that the happiness and freedom from suffering of all living beings is vastly more important than our own, because we are just one and others are countless. And this idea that we're the center of the universe and that it profoundly matters what happens just to us and not so much about what happens to everyone else is completely mistaken. It's not a realistic view of the world. And so with wisdom, then we turn our attention towards others. And what we find is that this wish for others to be happy is an inexhaustible fountain of happiness for ourselves. So wishing others to be happy is a happiness for ourselves. And so through this wish to make others happy, we see them as very precious and important. We care deeply about what happens to them. We care deeply about every living being and what their experience is. And so what that does is this creates a world for us in which everyone matters. Everybody becomes, from our side, our best friend. So imagine if you went into a room full of people and they were all your best friends. And so to a Mahayana Buddhist, to a practicing Buddhist who's developed their mind in this way, every living being is the most precious friend from their side. And so then how does a person feel? They feel wonderful. Their love protects them from suffering, and their love causes them to behave in the most beneficial way with everyone else. And so in this manner, we first, through understanding our own suffering and then understanding the enormous importance of every other living being, we eventually then develop the mind of bodhicitta, which propels us to attain enlightenment. And then at that state, we develop an omniscient mind with which we are able to help each and every living being every day. It is said that if all living beings, if we all cherished others more than ourselves, every single problem of this world would disappear within a few years. And so for us individually, this is actually what happens, is that our problems start to disappear, and as our mind fills with love and compassion. So Buddha's path to enlightenment is not just a path to enlightenment, but it's a path to a better day. So whether you want to attain enlightenment or you want to have a great week, the methods are exactly the same. And the methods are to understand that we have pure, infinite potential in our heart. And so there's every living being, and that the only problems we have are the problems of our delusions, like anger, uncontrolled desire, self-grasping, ignorance, jealousy, etc. And so it's a win-win. It's a win-win whether you want to attain enlightenment or not. And it's always a win-win. Helping others always helps ourselves. It's a very brief introduction to all of 84,000 teachings that Buddha had. So I don't know if there's questions that you would like me to answer, but I'm very happy to stop here or answer some questions.
Thank you, LJ. Yeah, there are some questions that came in the question box. Do you have access to those, or would you like me to?
I do.
Okay.
Actually, I just had a look at them. Okay, so it says our delusions are an enemy. Profound, yes, definitely. And the fun part is determining what are delusions and what are not. Much easier said than done. Actually, that's very correct. There are some delusions that are very easy for us to recognize. For example, anger is relatively easy. Jealousy is. But uncontrolled desire is very, very challenging, because uncontrolled desire and love for us look similar. Well, in reality, they're vastly different states of mind. So thank you for that point. Delusions can be quite challenging for us to recognize. Let me see. Oh, yeah, there's two different things. What is the most profound thing you have learned or experienced practicing Buddhism? Well, this Buddha nature actually was the most important thing that I have found in Buddhism. The difference between love and uncontrolled desire was profoundly important. But by far is the ultimate nature of reality, emptiness, is the most profound and the most wisdom filled. It's a wisdom. It's an incredible wisdom that tells us the true nature of reality, that all is created by mind. And the teachings are very clear. It can be understood, and that's, I have to say, by far that was the most profound thing. I'm loving what you're sharing about the way to see living beings. This may be off topic, but that painting behind you, what is a Buddhist image? This is called, it's an image of all the Buddhas. It's called the Field of Merit. All the Buddhas in one beautiful image. When you encounter someone, is this okay? Should I stop? Oh no, I think I have 2 more minutes. When we encounter someone who embraces their delusions instead of happiness, is there something you can do other than setting an example to help them recognize and overcome their delusions? That's a wonderful, wonderful question. And as a parent of a teenager, I can tell you by far an example, being a good example is the best. Honestly, it is by far the best way that we teach people, because if you are in a situation when, let's say, somebody's really, really angry with us, and we respond with absolute patient acceptance and compassion, there's nothing more powerful than experiencing this with someone. And so even though we may be, it seems like faster for us to just teach them and, hey, this is your delusion. But unless we are ready to hear that, and this is where our compassion comes in, when we're with others, if we listen with compassion, with an open mind, we're going to sense if there is an opening. If there's an opening towards a discussion like this, then yes, by all means go. But with our empathy, compassion, we can tell when there isn't. And then there's absolutely nothing wrong with just being an example. I think this is all I see.
There was one more. Somebody put a question in the chat instead of in the Q&A box. It says, what particular practices do you recommend for ridding ourselves of these delusions?
So each and every bit of Buddha's teaching, 84,000 teachings, have that only one single purpose, is for us to get rid of our delusions. And so anything. But one thing that I will point out is that Buddhists rely on 3 jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Sangha is a spiritual community. This is essential. So finding a spiritual community that you can go to, receive teachings, ask questions, and get support is the way to go. Yeah, we really need a community that can guide us and support us in the right way. So instead of talking to a friend who'll say, yeah, you should get angry, somebody will say, yeah, you got angry. You know, what do you think we can do? You know, so I would say finding a community.
Looks like one more came in, LJ.
Okay. Let me see here. When one is stuck in a state of delusion, how is it that overcome? That is a brilliant question. So one thing to understand is that a state of delusion, for example, anger, it's almost like a self-perpetuating state in which we are out of control. So what needs to happen when we're in a state of delusion is that we need to essentially, just for a few moments, shut the mind down for a reset, a little bit like shutting down a computer. So a breathing meditation, or there's meditations like, one of them is called absorption of cessation, when we become imagine that our mind cannot perceive things. We need some method of meditation to take our mind away from that spinning inside the delusion into a reset state. Because if you've ever tried to argue yourself out of anger, you would have failed, right? Because a state of delusion is out of control and it's self-perpetuating. So it's like almost there needs to be like a shut off for a few minutes, few moments, reset. Our mind becomes a little bit calmer, and then within a calmer space, we then remember some wisdom that we have heard before that we can now start to practice. So meditation is an essential tool, both for cutting the flow of delusion and for generating wisdom. Because through meditating, we're developing familiarity with the right way, wisdom way of thinking. Because when we're relating to the world from the point of view of wisdom, our mind is at peace. We are happy and we're acting in the best way possible. Do you want me to answer this one more question, or do we need to move on?
Go ahead and get the last one.
Okay. How would you distinguish a delusion from a distraction? Most of our distractions are coming from a delusion. So, for example, if you're trying to meditate on the breath and you're thinking about what you're going to do after, because that sounds more interesting, that means that you are following a delusion of uncontrolled desire that's saying, I need something outside of myself to be happy, and my inner peace is not happening. Yeah, so most of our distractions are actually coming from delusion. Meditation is so important, helps us to become more mindful and can alter the course of one's life away from what is keeping them stuck with their dirt. 100%. You're preaching to the choir. Yeah.
Well, Jay, thank you so much. That was really, really wonderful. I am
Thank you.
very much looking forward to you closing up with our Buddhist prayer for world peace today.
Thanks.
All right. Our next speaker is Nimai Dāsa. He is a member of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness and is a board member for the ISKCON of Delaware chapter. He and his wife, Navali, have been hosting a weekly mantra meditation program out of their home in Milton, Delaware for the past 5 years, and they also assist with the weekly Sunday program at the ISKCON Temple in Bear, Delaware. Nimai has brought kirtan outreach programs to a variety of locations and yoga studios in Delaware, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and New York. He's been teaching at a public middle school for the past 14 years and lives with his wife, his 11-year-old stepson Ryder, and their cat Lila. I've been to Krishna Village several times and have enjoyed listening to Nimai and the others lead group discussions on Vedic philosophy and how ancient wisdom can enrich our modern day lives. Welcome, Nimai. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody coming together to make this possible. Is my sound okay? You can hear me well?
Sounds great. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. I apologize I wasn't able to join from the beginning. My brother got married this weekend, so a lot of family in town, a lot of things going on, but very happy to be here now. I'd like to open with a brief mantra offering my respects to the teachers that came before me. Om Magana Timrandashya Gunanjana Chalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. And I have a slideshow presentation that I am going to share. And pardon the delay, here we go. So, thank you, Jill, so much for organizing this. Thank you all for the opportunity to speak something, and please forgive my shortcomings in this endeavor to share a little bit about my story and my practice with you all. So my plan for this talk is to do a quick intro to the philosophy and the practice, just in a nutshell. Talk a little bit about how I came to the practice, talk a little bit about what I love about the practice, recommend some books, and mention some frequently asked questions, and then also open for Q&A at the end. So the foundational teaching of Bhagavad Gita is our core text. And the foundational teaching is you're not the body. And building our lives around catering to the demands of the body is a recipe for frustration. And, you know, these fleeting pleasures cannot bring lasting satisfaction. So that is a teaching that is very non-sectarian. I think practically every spiritual tradition on the planet teaches something along those lines. I did want to give a little attention to this image I have on the screen. I wanted to break down this idea you're not the body, because I feel like for most of my life I understood that academically on to some degree. But even when I had, no interest in spiritual life, but I wasn't like, I didn't understand, okay, so what? Like, how's that going to affect the way I live my life? So we can see in this image, we're not the body, we're a spirit soul. We are in the vehicle of the material body temporarily. And you may notice that this body I'm in now is nothing like my baby body. That baby body doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. Modern science says even full-grown adults, every 7 years, every cell in the body is replaced. So we can understand, I wasn't that baby body because it doesn't exist anymore. And here I am saying I this and me that, right? And similarly, my boy body as a toddler, that body was different from my baby body. That body's gone too. My adolescent body, the body of my youth, the body I was in my 20s, all those bodies have come and gone. And there's still this constant. There's the spirit soul, the consciousness, the individual unit of consciousness that is animating the material body. This is really stressed in Bhagavad Gita. It's one of the first teachings in the text. And so, okay, what do we do with that? Well, first of all, as I mentioned, I got a little ahead of myself. Building our life around catering to the demands of the body that's not the ultimate purpose of life. That's not the ultimate reality. There's more going on here than like ice creams and mini golf, right? Doesn't mean ice cream and mini golf is evil. And Bhagavad Gita acknowledges I have to maintain the body. I've been given this gift of the material body, and it's my responsibility to maintain the body nicely. It's one of my duties. But at the same time, if my entire life is only revolving around catering to the demands of the body, then there's something more available if we want it. We have free will. So many thinkers have noticed, again, this is very non-sectarian, this idea that our eternal constitutional position is to serve. We can't escape it. As Bob Dylan said, you got to serve somebody. Every moment of every day, there's no inactivity. There's always some activity. The nature of the soul is active, and we have to be serving something. So we can choose to serve ourselves and our, material desires, or we can serve a higher purpose, a higher power. So the specially recommended service for this particular day and age, according to these ancient yoga wisdom literatures, is this hearing and chanting process. It's Shravanam Kirtanam in Sanskrit. Hearing and chanting the glories and or the names of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is a phrase, a term that Prabhupada coined. We're talking about the cause of all causes. There's this nice analogy in the Yoga Wisdom literatures that just as different people in different parts of the world who speak different languages are referring to the same sun in the sky by different names, in the same way, all of these traditions are pointing at the cause of all causes, who goes by infinite names. So just as we don't need to, the theme is peace and unity, I believe. Just as we don't need to, butt heads, start wars over which name we use for the sun in the sky. In the same way, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness is teaching about Krishna, which is one of infinite names for the Supreme Personality, the cause of all causes. People say, which God are you talking about? We're talking about the God. So this is Bhagavad Gita is sharing non-sectarian spiritual wisdom. It's one of the oldest books in the world, and it's recommending this hearing and chanting process. And we find this same practice in so many traditions, if not all traditions. And there's one caveat. I don't know if it's a caveat, but sometimes in some traditions, practitioners, spiritualists, seekers, they will chant to different empowered entities, universal managers. They'll, for example, if there was a drought, which the East Coast, at least the Mid-Atlantic, has had a drought this year. If they were to offer prayers or mantras or some kind of worship to the controlling deity of water, rains, this kind of thing. That's considered good in that it's acknowledging a higher power. Krishna consciousness, as Srila Prabhupada taught it, is recommending specifically chanting to the cause of all causes, the supreme controller, and not asking for material benefits. It's recommended instead that we, the whole purpose of Krishna consciousness is to awaken or uncover our eternal loving relationship with our divine conscious source. That is the end game of the practice. And so anybody in any tradition in any part of the world who is offering any kind of prayer or worship to that end, please help me to serve you. Please help me to remember you. Please help me to fully experience my loving relationship with you. That falls into this recommended practice by the Yoga Wisdom Literatures, the Yuga Dharma, Shravanam Kirtanam, hearing and chanting. So we find with experience, this is not sentimentalism. This is a very potent practice. The Sanskrit is Chetodarpana Marjanam, that this hearing and chanting process cleanses the mirror of the heart so that I can see who I really am. I can see who God is. I can see my eternal loving relationship with that person. And once we've reached this state of self-realization and Krishna consciousness or God consciousness, then we automatically see every other living entity as part and parcel of Krishna too. All false prestige, all false sense of proprietorship, envy, these things disappear. Godly qualities manifest. We become much less likely to cuss out people in traffic, that kind of thing. Become much more patient with family members, bosses, coworkers, children. And sharing this message of hope, of that, actually there is a loving God, and we do have a relationship, and it's just covered at times, just like sometimes we can't see the sun in the sky due to cloud cover. It doesn't mean that the sun is gone or doesn't exist. It's just temporarily covered. And this hearing and chanting is the method to uncover that relationship. And by uncovering that relationship, all of our other problems, both individual problems, collective problems, these temporary material problems associated with the temporary material body, they are all solved because we get this vision of eternity, seeing ourselves as an eternal spirit soul as opposed to the temporary material body is it's a drastic paradigm shift. So the big thing is this, to kind of summarize the foundational teachings of Krishna consciousness, we need to get back in touch with our divine source. It's like we broke up with God, and there can be no real happiness or peace in our lives until we become fully aware of that relationship. So there are a number of different methods for hearing and chanting. The number one way that Hare Krishnas, our namesake, the number one way that we hear and chant or engage in this process is by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. It's 16 names. Krishna means all attractive. So it's a name that is identifying the cause of all causes. And Hare is the divine feminine. Hare is divine love personified. So actually, one of our secrets as Hare Krishnas is we worship the divine couple. The energy and the energetic, they're inseparable. And then, sorry, I'm getting a echo if everyone could mute. Sorry. And then Rama is the reservoir of all pleasure, and specifically real pleasure, as opposed to fleeting pleasures of the material senses interacting with their objects. Rama implies actual pleasure, experiencing that relationship.
I'm really disturbed that I've lost what I need.
Jill, maybe you're
Yeah, I'm
able
going to
to-
take a look
There
at
we
that
go.
right now.
She just muted. Thank you. So that's kind of the some of the philosophy, scratching the surface of the philosophy behind the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. The nice thing is you don't have to know anything about it. It just works. And the main purpose of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness is make this available for those who are interested and want to experiment with it. If you're more comfortable with chanting names for God that come from your tradition, in a different language, that's great. That's still again, that still falls under the Yuga Dharma, the recommended practice for this day and age by these ancient yoga wisdom literatures. But if you'd like to experiment with the Maha Mantra, everyone is welcome. There's no qualification necessary. There are no hoops to jump through. And the mantra in full is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And so when we come together as a group, we like to sing and dance, and one person sings the mantra and everyone else sings it back. We go back and forth like that. It usually begins kind of slow and meditative and then builds in enthusiasm. And people take turns, like we have an 8-hour kirtan coming up next month. And so there'll be different half-hour slots where one person will lead the meditation, will lead the chanting, and they'll sing the mantra in full. Everyone else will sing it back. They'll have their time to lead, and then someone else will take their turn, and we'll go like that. So singing and dancing is called kirtan, that method. We also have devotees have a personal mantra meditation practice on beads, on a mala, strand of beads. And the strand of beads is helpful because it helps us to count our mantras, which is an insurance policy against the mind. Because the mind can say, we have a lot going on this weekend. It's really busy. Maybe we'll just skip it. So devotees commit to a certain number of rounds each day, and we use the beads to count those mantras without having to actually, count. And so we can have a better opportunity to focus our full attention on the mantra, and the chanting on the beads becomes, mechanical, second nature. It doesn't distract us from the hearing portion of the hearing and chanting process. Another way to engage in hearing and chanting is to hear and chant the ancient yoga wisdom lectures. That can be reading them on our own. It can be reading them in a group setting, and also discussing these topics, these teachings. What we're doing right now falls under the umbrella category of hearing and chanting. So I see two questions. I briefly mentioned the purpose of Islam movement, and we might come back to that and answer that more fully later. And does the Divine Mother, Divine Father carry more weight, or are they equal? They're equal. We understand that Radha Krishna that's our understanding of who God is as a person. Our understanding of God is not that God is in a control tower somewhere sweating, trying to manage everything. It's like, no, everything's taken care of. The material world is functioning under the laws of material nature, and God is enjoying with devotees. And our conception of the personality of Godhead is the divine couple, Radha Krishna. Thank you. And I'll see. There we go. Looks like the other question got taken care of. So, mantra meditation is our main practice. And hearing and chanting the wisdom literatures is also right there on equal footing with the mantra meditation. So I want to mention, how did I get into this? Because I'm not a lifelong practitioner. I was introduced 8.5 years ago. And well, I have a little brief story about it. So I experienced some traumatic losses in my youth and early 20s. I ended up turning to substance abuse. I had no clue how to deal with everything I was going through. I was in an incredibly dark place. Like, on paper, I was okay. I had a career, I had a house, car, girlfriend, but inside, I was a total wreck. And when I was 29, I got invited to a monthly kirtan outreach program at the local theater. And I was immediately blown away by the instruments and the mantras. And I didn't really know what was going on, but I could tell that this was something real and this was something powerful. So for the first couple of years, that was about it. I was going to this monthly program. I'd really be looking forward to it. I would listen to kirtan in the car. I would do a little bit of personal mantra meditation practice on beads. I wasn't really planning on becoming a Hare Krishna or what have you. I tried reading the books, but I wasn't so into it. Some of the aspects of the philosophy really spoke to me, others not so much. I should mention that I met my amazing wife at this kirtan outreach program. So seemingly independent of kirtan, a few months after I went to my first one, I got sober in a 12-step program. So no one from kirtan mentioned anything about me getting sober. It was just time for me. I couldn't live that way anymore. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I got really into this 12-step program and got involved with a lot of service commitments and had a really nice foundation for spiritual life, this combination of kirtan and getting to know some devotees, some other practitioners, and then the 12 steps, going through the 12 steps, and then becoming a sponsor, taking other people through the 12 steps. This was all working in concert. But a couple of years into my sobriety, I was at another jumping off point. It means I was going through some circumstances that were making me totally miserable all over again. I was at a crossroads. I wasn't sure which way to go. And I got this idea, those Hare Krishnas seem super blissful and the practice is super powerful. Maybe there's more there than I have even realized. Maybe I missed something in my cursory glance over the books and the philosophy. So I started driving up to the temple in Bear on Sundays and reading some more of the books. And it was like puzzle pieces snapping into place. And the thing was, when I tried looking at the philosophy the first time, I didn't have the overall context. Like Prabhupada, I've mentioned Prabhupada a couple of times. Prabhupada is the empowered, amazing teacher who brought this set of practices and philosophy to the West in the 1960s. And Prabhupada would be presenting some little piece of the philosophy, and my mind would just reject it out of hand. But eventually I started seeing the whole picture, and it became clear. And I had this realization like, oh, this actually all makes incredible sense. So I have, if I may, well, I'll check the Q&A real quick. Let's see. The purpose of the praying, the chanting the Maha Mantra is to render service. It's very direct. Devotional service is very direct service to God. And we're not asking for, as you mentioned in your question, I appreciate you picking up on that. We are not asking for material benefits. We're not trying to manipulate. It's just, you've given me so much. Let me spend a little time reciprocating. Let me take a little bit of time out of my day to acknowledge all these gifts you've given me and acknowledge you, the cause of all causes, and it just, please let me be of service. Help me to be of service, like that. So I find that engaging in some reading and or mantra meditation each morning before I leave the house helps me to carry that consciousness with me throughout the day. And really Bhakti, Bhagavad Gita is teaching Bhakti Yoga, which is a whole yogic system. It's a whole lifestyle. It's like, it's very addictive. And there's so many facets of the practice. There's so many ways to engage in devotional service. And essentially Bhakti is the art of spiritualizing our everyday lives. Spiritualizing cooking and eating and cleaning, and how to spiritualize our careers and our family lives, how to spiritualize everything and turn everything we do into an offering, into a service to a higher power. And it's a tricky thing. It's a subtle thing, because sometimes it's easy to pay lip service and then really do whatever we want. So it's, the ins and outs of it are going to be outside the scope of this talk. But let me see. I'll come back to those other questions. Thank you so much. I appreciate your engagement and your kind attention. I want to mention a few, because I think I'm running low on time. What I really love about the practice, it's the only satisfying explanation I've ever heard of reality. It's the only satisfying explanation I've ever heard for the problem of evil. Like, how can there be an omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent entity and there still be so much suffering in the world? I can't answer that right now. I'm going to recommend some books. I have powerful, consistent spiritual experiences. I'm involved in this amazing community. I mentioned devotional service is very direct service, because I'm giving my most valuable resource, which is my time. It doesn't matter how much money you get, you can't buy another second. And these other material bodies, these other life forms, the cats and dogs aren't able to have these conversations. So this time in this human form of life is this valuable opportunity to engage in spiritual practice. I really believe that our outreach efforts are the topmost humanitarian work. And this practice has given me a profound sense of purpose and connection, and it deeply resonates. Like, this is what I've been looking for. So, like all good Hare Krishnas, I'm going to try to get you to read our books. This first one is The 4 Questions, Pathway to Inner Peace. It's very it's non-sectarian spiritual wisdom. It's very practical, it's very accessible. I highly recommend it. I'm going to share my contact information. If you I send them out on a donation basis. You know, anything you like. If you read it, I want you to have it. I'll ship it to you. Please feel free to contact me. I love answering questions about my life and this philosophy. So that's a good one. The 4 questions. It's a really nice introduction to Krishna consciousness. Bhagavad Gita, as I mentioned, is it's our core text. This version by Rancher Prime. Rancher Prime is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and he wrote this book actually for his children. So he strove to make it as accessible and straightforward as possible, which is nice for people like me too. And then this comprehensive guide to Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is a conversation, and it flows like a conversation. So one topic will come up, and then it'll go away, and then it'll come back, and it'll go away, come back. So this commentary is organized thematically. So it's like the author, H.D. Goswami, who's also a disciple of Prabhupada, H.D. Goswami made a chapter about karma and said, okay, this is everything the Bhagavad Gita has to say about karma. And he breaks down the Bhagavad Gita like that. So it really helped me to wrap my head around this profound conversation. And then, of course, you can't go wrong with Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is. You know, there's so many versions of the Gita out there, and Prabhupada's version has the word-for-word translation. So you can see exactly how he rendered the original Sanskrit, and it's been praised by scholars all over the world for his translation method. You know, it's this funny thing. I've read so many versions of Gita, and it's almost comical how wildly different they can be. So this version I highly recommend. It's authentic. You know, Prabhupada wasn't some upstart that you know, invented his own religion. He instead is in a long chain of teachers, you know, student disciple relationship, and so he has insights that, you know, someone who's just studying this text as a scholar won't have. You know, in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which there's these 4 texts, 10:8 through 10:11, are considered the summary of the whole Gita, and Krishna shares that one who renders service, he gives the understanding by which we can come. You know, it's through devotional service only that we can uncover that eternal relationship. And devotional service, again, is non-sectarian. I'm not saying you have to have the trappings of Krishna bhakti. Again, this is very broad-minded stuff. It's not tribal monotheism. My God can beat up your God. This is much more universal understanding. I also recommend this Wisdom of the Sages podcast. There's a nice online community surrounding that podcast program. And also, I highly recommend Bhakti Community. It's organized by the author of the 4 questions, who is my direct Diksha guru. And so I can't say enough good things about his programming. They have some in-person stuff in the Bay Area in California. We have in-person stuff in Delaware. But if you're not in Delaware or California, they have all these online programs as well. So I think I'm about out of time. Ran out of time for the FAQ. Let me peek. There's a lot of stuff in the question box. The first book was the 4 questions. Yes. And I'm going to share my contact information in just a moment. Do I use mudra while chanting? Yes, we hold the beads with the thumb and the 3rd finger, and that is a mudra. It is nice to do some pranayam in preparation for the japa, the personal mantra meditation, but it's not required, but recommended. The teachings do include reincarnation. That is a part of the philosophy. But the soul is eternal. we are eternal individuals. Mama Vamso Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana is from the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna is sharing that we are eternally part and parcel. So that's the big question. The big question is, sometimes this is referred to, finish up with this, sometimes this is referred to as the science of self-realization, because it's kind of a startling realization that I don't know who I am. If I'm not this body, if I'm not any of the characteristics associated with this temporary material body, then what's left? What does it mean to be an eternal spirit soul? So that's what we're getting at. And yes, we believe that Krishna answers prayers. Yes, we believe that empowered teachers are sent to deliver this message of hope. And I've had so many potent spiritual experiences through this practice. And the big thing is, for me, is Prabhupada accomplished superhuman feats. I mean, he was, from my studies of him, he was divinely empowered. He came to the US, he was 69 years old. Over the course of the next 12 years, he opened 100 centers, he published 70 books, he trained up thousands of students, and create a worldwide movement. And the potency of a teacher is in their disciples, right? So of course, not every person that took initiation from Prabhupada was able to stay the course and become a living saint, but a lot of people, there are some very impressive individuals in this movement. Some of these men and women are unlike anybody I've ever met. Their connection to source is palpable. And the thing is, you can't fake steadiness. I might be able to fake something for a few weeks or even a month, maybe even a year, but to have these really strict, serious practices and do incredible amounts of service for decades on end, that really gets my attention. So I I'm sold. In a short talk, it's hard to convey everything I want to convey. And the information about the divine couple, that is there's more information about that in the exciting sequel to Bhagavad Gita, which is Srimad Bhagavatam. And I understand that last year's webinar, my friend, he presented on Srimad Bhagavatam. So I also have like the first 8 chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam. I have that text available too. But that's where the detailed information about the philosophy is. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is there. Radha is not there on the battlefield with Krishna, so he is revealing himself as the Supreme Personality Godhead, but just because Radharani wasn't there at that moment doesn't take away from her position or our understanding of her position. So I hope that answers that. And Jill, how are we doing? Should I try to answer these questions or should I wrap up?
Looks like there's a good one, and then one more question about the book.
Okay. So I have read discussion of Brahman in the Upanishads. Maheshvar. Okay, so those are the 3 controlling deities of the material world. And this gets really technical. And this information can be found in the first few chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam. But Srimad Bhagavatam's the postgraduate study. It's recommended to read Bhagavad Gita first. So these details about the controlling deities of the three modes of material nature. That gets really technical. And the Upanishads are interesting texts. Most of the translators of the Upanishads tend to focus on the impersonal aspect of the Supreme. So Srila Prabhupada certainly acknowledges the impersonal aspect of the Supreme, but we don't focus on the impersonal aspect of the Supreme to the exclusion of other aspects of the Supreme. So the three primary aspects of the Supreme, according to the Vedic version, are Brahman, which is the impersonal, the divine effulgence, which is emanating from the Supreme Person. And the Upanishads speak a lot about that aspect of the Supreme. Some of the Upanishads. East Upanishad is all about Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan, which is the first Upanishad. And there's a nice, Srila Prabhupada did a nice translation commentary on East Upanishad, and I have that available too. I'm not a book salesman, believe it or not. I'm a middle school teacher, but the three primary aspects are Brahman, which is the impersonal effulgence, and Paramatma, which is the localized, the divine spark in every person. There's actually two souls in every body. There's super soul, God sitting in the heart as Chaitya Guru, and then the individual soul. The Svetasvatara Upanishad actually makes the analogy of it's like two birds sitting in a tree branch. And I could explain further, but we're out of time. So Paramatma is the localized aspect of the Supreme, and Bhagavan is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So yes, there's a very good question. The answer gets very technical. I hope that overview was okay. And Srila Prabhupada is the man that I mentioned. There's a nice movie about him. I think it's called the mantra and the man who started it all. I think the movie's called Hare Krishna. I can find it and share it out. And yes, the name of the book, well, I mentioned many books, so I'm not sure which book. But the Four Questions was the book that I mentioned first, and then I mentioned a few different versions of Bhagavad Gita, and then I mentioned Srimad Bhagavatam, and then I mentioned Isopanishad. So I invite anyone who wants to know anything more about any of this, feel free to contact me. Anyone who'd like any books, feel free to contact me however you like. Email or WhatsApp or Facebook. Those are all great. You could also text or call directly on my phone number, whatever you like. Thank you so much.
Nimai, thank you so much. It's funny. I just don't think we allot for enough time for this because we could just keep going. The questions just keep running in. Maybe next year we ought to give the speakers more time. All right, if you want to stop screen sharing, Nimai, we will move on to Julia Rodriguez. She is a psychotherapist and native of South Carolina who discovered the Bahai faith as a teenager and embraced her new identity as a world citizen, dedicating her life and purpose to a faith whose pivotal principle is the essential unity and oneness of the human race. Joining thousands upon thousands around the world, she works at the grassroots in her community to empower herself and others, to improve their own lives and contribute to the advancement of civilization. Baha'i beliefs address such essential themes as the oneness of humanity and freedom from prejudice, the inherent nobility of the human being, the progressive revelation of religious truth, the fundamental equality of the sexes, and the harmony between religion and science. Working side by side with others in a worldwide community whose aim is to promote the advancement of humankind towards its collective maturity, Julia finds purpose and enjoys walking the path of service to humanity. She is fluent in Spanish and has traveled extensively in Latin America, the Caribbean. She has studied dance in Guinea, West Africa, the Dominican Republic, and Cuba. She has founded an Afro-Latin dance company, Buen Ashe, in 2006, and has served as the artistic director and principal choreographer for the dance company since that time. When not working for social justice through her faith as a Bahai, you can find her lining up the dance floor or snuggled up reading books to her 3-year-old son, Dean. Julia was my first speaker to commit this year, and I have very much enjoyed getting to know her over Zoom and in our continuing conversations about her faith. I've also connected with the local Bahai community here in Delaware and have tremendously enjoyed my time with them. I'm excited today to hear the rest of her story. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and share in this incredible gathering. So without further ado, I'll share my screen. And let's see. I think I want to make this a little bit bigger. So today I have the privilege and the challenge of sharing my faith, which is the Bahai faith. And I think the Bahai faith can be principally summed up in this concept of world unity. The focus of the Bahai faith is the unity of the human race, and that this is the era in which this is both possible and inevitable. So one of my favorite quotes from the Bahai faith from Baha'u'llah, the prophet and founder of the Bahai faith, is, "Let your vision be world embracing." The earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. So our theme today obviously is peace, and this is a particularly significant principle in the Bahai faith because the perspective of Baha'is is that this is the era of peace. This is the era of the inevitability of peace, how challenging it is to get to that peace, how much humanity has to suffer before we recognize our essential unity. This is in the hands of human beings. But that this is the promised day of God, and this is the day in which the lamb and the wolf will lie down together, and that world peace is within our future, within our reach. So for the first time in history, it's possible for everyone to view the entire planet. This is the reality of our world today. We have the capacity, both visually, to view our planet in a way that wasn't possible, obviously in the time of the religions of the past. And that we now have a world vision that simply wasn't possible. We see ourselves, we see our fellow human beings and our planet, and this vision and the knowledge that we are all part of this planet is ultimately going to lead to world peace. So I'm going to try to encapsulate both my own story and some of the principles of the Bahai faith today. I'm going to start with the principles, and there's a lot of them and they're really great. So I'm going to try to go through them as thoroughly, but as briefly as I can so we get the idea. And then I'm going to share a little bit about my story and kind of what inspired me to embrace this faith. So a few of the principal tenets of the Bahai faith is that this is the era of the unity and oneness of the human race, that every human being is inherently noble, that there is the fundamental equality between men and women that has always been the case in the eyes of God, but is only now possible in this era of our human evolution, and that there is harmony between science and religion. There is no conflict, that they both enhance each other. Science is the physical world's manifestation of God's love. If we look around us and we learn from the world around us, what is our reality? What are the rules of nature? What are the rules of chemistry and biology? All of these things lead to a knowledge of God. And ultimately, these are doors that open to us a further vista on religion. So they both enhance the understanding of each other. Religion also inspires science, right? Because science, if we look at it through the lens of a spiritual lens, we look at it differently than if we view it materially. For example, the development of atomic energy. This can be put to tremendous use for the betterment of humankind. It can also be used for extreme destruction. And this is the reason that science must be illumined by religion and by faith. Baha'u'llah, again, the prophet founder of the Bahai faith, these are his words: "That which the Lord hath ordained as the sovereign remedy and mightiest instrument for the healing of all the world is the union of all its peoples in one universal cause and one common faith." So religion and its remedy and the beauty of the teachings of these, we'll talk about the Baha'i perspective, but these messengers of God is the healing remedy for all of society's ills. As I mentioned, the Baha'i faith is the principal purpose is to unite all peoples and races in one common faith. And we believe that traditions of every people contain the promise of a future when peace and harmony will be established on earth, that the promised day is here. Almost a little bit emotional when I say that because it's such a beautiful thing to say. And we are now possible for humanity to build a new world. So kind of maybe the description, the baseline description of Baha'i belief about God and his creation is that throughout all the ages, there has been a succession of divine messengers, known as manifestations of God, because they manifest the message of God. And these, their purpose is to educate and guide humanity and awaken in human beings the capacity to contribute to the advancement of civilization to an extent never before possible. So when we look at the religious traditions throughout all of history, every divine messenger, whether it's Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Krishna, these are all divine messengers, and their purpose has all been the same, to awaken us to the ability to contribute to our own advancement as a human race. So you can see this is a really helpful a graphic that shows kind of the Baha'i belief that God's faith evolves. And then, we just mentioned Abraham, Krishna, Moses. We're just hearing about the faiths from the wonderful speakers today of these messengers. So Baha'is view them as all part of one faith. God reveals himself over time, and he speaks through the language or through the mouths of these divine messengers who came at different periods in human history to different parts of the world to share this one unfolding faith of God. And so these divine educators' teachings have provided for the basis for the advancement of civilization. And Baha'is believe that Baha'u'llah is the latest of these messengers, and that his teachings explain that the religions of the world are successive chapters of one faith. And as I said, that they bring this unified, continuous series of teachings from God, revealing the spiritual knowledge humanity needs at the time that they appeared. So they're one unbroken chain of wisdom and guidance for humanity, but their teachings are slightly different depending on the requirements and nature of human society at that time, both in the world collectively as well as within the direct place in the world where they came. As I mentioned, Baha'u'llah, whose name, this is his title, his name means the glory of God, is the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. And we believe that he's brought the teachings that humanity needs for our particular issues at this present time. So as I mentioned, it is possible through science and all of the creative powers released in the world for us to recognize our unity, for us to travel around the world. We can get on planes, we can see each other on the internet, we can see images from space, things that were never before possible in past faiths, at the time of past faiths, is possible now. And so Baha'u'llah's teachings follow within the context of what we are now capable of perceiving in the sense of this concept of our world being one. We believe that after a manifestation of God, and again, the manifestation of God refers to these messengers, Abraham, Buddha, Jesus, etc., that there's a human society is reshaped. If you look at the history of, the religions of God, Jesus' teachings, look at from this one humble man in Israel, in the Holy Land, the entire Western world was transformed, and human society was reshaped. And we are moving towards this organization of human society as a planetary civilization in today's era. So the purpose of the manifestation of God have all been the same, even though the message is slightly different depending on the conditions. They are the light bringers of the world. They bring truth, they bring love, they bring the message of God. And this is supposed to say releases a fresh outpouring of spirit into creation. So the word of God that streams from their particular mouth at that time in history has a power that regenerates human society, that opens the hearts of human beings. And so we believe that new forces are released that permeate human society and develop the consciousness in society further than was possible prior to the coming of that particular messenger. So if, this graphic again is kind of helpful. It's obviously, simplifying very complex things. But if we look at the evolution of humankind, as I mentioned, if we're looking back to the earlier faiths, the focus at that time was more on the unity of the family. As these faiths continued throughout history, we became more unified as tribes. And then the concept of a city-state became possible as society advanced. Then even the concept of a nation. And now in the era of the Baha'i faith, we believe that the concept is now world unity. So it's always been about unity and love and cohesion. It's simply that the circle of that unity has expanded as each messenger of God brought a fresh and new message for society as it was advancing. So what is the crucial need for humanity at this day and age, this era of God's religion, is the crucial need to find a unifying vision of ourselves and our society. And Baha'is believe that the vision that can guide us through what that means in this turbulent era, when people are, at war, when people are infinitely far from recognizing the unity of our human species, the Baha'u'llah has brought teachings that can guide and unite us. So as I mentioned, this is the era, the coming of age of the entire human race. We are now at our collective maturity. We have capacity that we never had in the past. So we're now in the period of adolescence where there's turbulence and there's great growth and great, all the things that teenagers embody: hope, just the search for justice, empowerment, and also a little bit of the confusion, the confusion and the kind of misdirected impulses. And so that's where we are. We're poised for our collective maturity. And this maturity will involve the consciousness of world citizenship, the founding of a world civilization and culture, and that this is the furthermost limit of the organization of human society, which is why we believe it's the promised day. We have arrived. We have arrived at the promises of the past in all the religious faiths. So I'm going to go through, probably faster than I should, some of the principles of the Baha'i faith, because these principles, although some of them have existed in the past, I would describe it as fleshed out. There's more information given with this new revelation in a way that has introduced both new concepts and reinvigorated concepts that formerly existed. So the first and probably the most, basic concept of the Baha'i faith is that we must search for truth, that we all have the responsibility of investigating our own reality. Every individual now today with increasing access to knowledge, increasing literacy, increasing capacity of human beings to learn and to know, we are each responsible for our own search for truth. And that requires us to set aside superstitions, beliefs, and traditions that we're blindly imitating, not the beautiful teachings that come and inspire us, but blind imitation of ancestral forms of religion that may have, to some extent, veered from the actual teachings of that manifestation of God, whoever brought this message. And we can see that in all faiths, that there has been a veering away, and misguided to some extent among some religious leaders, and leading people astray, whether it's to, from the beautiful faith of becoming a terrorist, or whatever thing can happen where a faith can go astray. And we'll talk more about that, veering away from the beautiful teachings of that manifestation. And that through this search from truth, the religions and nations of the world will become one, because when we investigate reality with an open and unbiased mind, we will see that we are one, and that there's no distinction truly between us. Again, this idea of mankind being one, that this is the recognition of the oneness of the world of humanity. And he says, "You are all the leaves of one, you're all the fruits of one branch and the leaves of one tree, that there are no differences or distinctions of race among you in the sight of God." And so in this day, Baha'u'llah has established that there is no other. In the past, there has been this concept of the believer and the unbeliever, and maybe those who maybe were saved and those who were not be saved. And in the Baha'i faith, we have now established there is no other. Every human being is on this tree of a fruit of the tree of humanity, and we are all ultimately going to move forward towards this goal of unity. Whether or not we get on board right away, whether or not we open our minds truly to the investigation of truth, There will be some delay depending on the capacity of the individuals, every human soul to do that. But ultimately, this is where we're going, and this is where we're going to end up. I kind of said this in the first one, but the independent investigation of reality. So we must search for truth and we must do it independently. There's slightly a difference there. And that in order to find truth, we must give up our prejudices. As I said, an open and receptive mind is essential. And Baha'u'llah says, the essence of all that we have revealed for thee is justice. For man to free himself from idle fancy and imitation, discern with the eye of oneness his glorious handiwork, and look into all things with a searching eye. And this refers to either our search for religious truth or for scientific truth or whatever truth there is. We believe that truth is ultimately all leading to one thing, which is the common unity of the human race, the unity of God, and the oneness of those teachings in this day and age. And this is a nice quote that I love. If we are earnestly seeking the truth, we look for it everywhere. Men and women being equal is one of my absolute favorites because it's such a beautiful one. And we, as I mentioned, we believe that this has always been true in God's sight. Simply, it wasn't applicable at that time in human history. So, although God has always believed and known that men and women are equal, it's now time for the realization and recognition of that. And one of the beautiful teachings of this is that women will be, in the Bahai faith, we're told, when we've achieved full equality, we will basically put our foot down. There will be no more war, and that the end of warfare on the face of the earth is the result of the fruition of the equality of men and women. And Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, is the teacher of the author of some of these quotes. And he basically says that the highest social development of mankind won't be possible until women are given equal access to education, equal rights, and the recognition of our equality. And that in past ages, humanity has essentially been defective. We didn't reach the highest level of our attainment. And as a result, war and its ravages have blighted the world. And that the education of women will be a mighty step towards its abolition and ending, because she will use her whole influence against war. Women simply will not allow our children to be, I'm almost going to cry, we'll never allow our children to be sacrificed. It's simply part of who we are. So she will be the greatest factor in establishing universal peace and international arbitration. This idea that science, as I mentioned, science and religion go hand in hand. And Baha'u'llah's teachings say that religion must be in conformity with science and science and reason. If it doesn't conform to reason, it's superstition. So, if we hold to a religious belief that doesn't fall within science, it is not true religion. And that religion and science are two wings upon which man's intelligence can soar to the heights with which the human soul can progress. And to clarify, this doesn't mean that the teachings of the past of the way the Bible describes evolution is necessarily incorrect. It simply means that the way perhaps we've interpreted those allegories are not are yet to be fulfilled with the addition of science and reason. So they do correspond. As I mentioned, this idea that religions should unite. Religion must be a source of unity and fellowship. And if it's not, it's preferable that it doesn't exist. Simply, if it can't do what it's meant to do, and it's carried into this conflict between people, basically taken away exactly from what the purpose is, and has become a cause of hatred and division, it would be better for the world to be without religion. And that is the basic Baha'i principle of what religion should do. It should unite and it should bring about love. It's time for us to abandon our prejudices. This is one of the fundamental purposes of the Baha'i faith. Prejudice must be abandoned and entirely removed. The world cannot attain peace, prosperity, and composure when we hold to prejudices that are incorrect and misleading. So this idea is that prejudice and fanaticism, from whatever source it comes, political, religious, denominational, patriotic, these are destructive to the foundations of human solidarity. And so man must release himself from these bonds in order for our oneness to become manifest. The promotion of world peace, as I mentioned, universal peace is assured by Baha'u'llah, as it will come about, and that this peace will prevail among all the nations of the world. It's one of the characteristic teachings of this day and age. Education for all. This is the era of education for all. We have now the means to access information. It's not that we were living in the medieval times when people didn't read and write and they had to use religious leaders to interpret for them. We now have the capacity for our own education, and that this is a necessary principle of this day. And so this is a beautiful quote from Baha'u'llah: "Regard man as a mind rich in gems of inestimable value. Education can alone cause it to reveal its treasures and enable mankind to benefit therefrom." So essentially, if we don't educate ourselves, we cannot reach within the mind of ourselves and contribute to the advancement of civilization and to the advancement of the this promise of world peace and the day of God. So absolutely, we must all be educated and have access to information and knowledge. Economic problems need spiritual solutions. Essentially, we're trying to fix all the problems with the world, with laws and with all kinds of things that don't involve spiritual enlightenment. And so essentially, when we unite, when we see our fundamental unity, and when we approach human affairs from the standpoint of spirituality, these solutions will become evident to us. It will become evident, clear as day, when we approach it with that perspective. It's time for a universal auxiliary language. And what does this mean? We all need to have and learn a language that we can communicate with each other. We can maintain our personal languages. This is going to happen. This is part of the beauty of the diversity of human affairs. But it's time for us to be able to hear each other and be able to, unfiltered, hear the voices of people of diverse faiths and diverse places in the world and understand their perspective, and that this will foster international communication and remove misunderstandings and difficulties. Work is worship. This is one of the great ones for people who, like myself, who are exhausted from working and try to have, at the end of the day, a time of spirituality and relaxation. And sometimes that's hard. And so this is one of the beautiful teachings that basically says that if you're doing your work in a spirit of service to humankind, this is counted as worship. God is checking off that box and saying, you did well today. I'm going to count that as worship of God. The elimination of extremes of wealth and poverty. This is just basic in understanding. If you look at the world from a spiritual lens, it doesn't make sense. We can't have extremes of wealth and poverty. We're not all going to be the same. We're all have different inclinations and different capacities. But this idea of extreme wealth and extreme poverty is simply contrary to a person of spiritual lens, a person with faith in God. And so simply this has to be abolished, and we all have to have access to means with which we can live with dignity and to that extent. So there's more principles of the faith that I can't share today, but this idea that with every religious manifestation, new principles come into effect, and Abdu'l-Baha describes this as a new garment, as if, this is a new age. We put on our collective humanity, we put on a new garment, and we have now access to, I read this, out of this pitch blackness, there dawned the morning splendor of the teachings of Baha'u'llah. He hath dressed the world in a garment that is new and fair, and that new garment is the principles which have come down from God. And we can see this echoed in the religions of the past when Christ talks about putting, you can't put wine into old wineskins, you have to have new wineskins. This is that concept of we have now new teachings. We can't use all the stuff of the past. We have to move forward with what's there for us and what is rich from us. It doesn't mean we cast away what was of the past. It means that we have new information and we must embrace that so that we can advance as a civilization. And so just what is the point of all this? If these messengers of God don't change us, don't revolutionize us both collectively and individually, there's really no point to the messenger of God coming, right? That is the purpose. And these are Baha'u'llah's words, is not the object of every revelation to effect a transformation in the whole character of mankind, a transformation that shall manifest itself both outwardly and inwardly, and shall affect both its inner life and external conditions. For if the character of man be not changed, the futility of God's universal manifestation would be apparent. And we can see this in the faiths of the past, the spread of Islam, the spread of Judaism, the spread of Christianity, how these things transform society and spread throughout the world. And that's what we're talking about. These teachings have to have that effect on humankind. So I'm going to shift a little bit into my personal story. I wanted to give you the background of the faith so that you could kind of see how I embrace this and why. So I've lived a life of tremendous, tremendous struggle, a lot of emotional pain. I'll talk about it a little bit. And one of the things that the thing that has saved my life is this idea that everything in God, everything that happens to us in life has a purpose, that God puts challenges in our way. Sometimes they're created by other human beings, but those challenges can, if we see them through the right lens, advance our character and our spiritual path. And I love this quote from Baha'u'llah. He says, I have ordained for thy training every atom in existence and the essence of all created things. In other words, everything that happens is a part of your spiritual path. And if you're able to view it through that lens and embrace it in that way, you can progress spiritually, even though it may cause you suffering. So my personal journey, I became a Bahai when I was 17. Even as a young child, I saw the injustice and the idea that perhaps I was saved, raised as a Christian, that I was saved, and that my friend, whose parents were Chinese, wasn't saved. It just, to me, even as maybe an 8-year-old child, I was like, well, how does that make sense? How could a just God punish a child who simply was following the teachings of her parents as I was following teachings of my parents? So from a young age, I saw this, and something about it didn't make sense to me. This just God, how would he do that? How would he just, based on where you come from, you're either part of the in saved crowd or not. And so I was very attracted to this Bahai concept of the oneness of humanity, and this idea that God is giving a faith to every human being on earth, and that's the purpose of this day and age. And that made sense to me when I'm talking about a just and merciful God. Wouldn't he want to have all of his creatures and all of his children have access to being saved, to their souls progressing? So this idea of the oneness of humanity and the commitment of Baha'is to the elimination of prejudices, to my 17-year-old psyche and heart, this made perfect sense. This is what the world needed. And so I embraced it. I came from a Christian background, but I embraced this, thinking to myself, this makes sense for the day and age in which we live. And again, this concept of religions being fundamentally one faith, all of this made perfect sense to me on a rational level. And after becoming a Baha'i, my worldview completely shifted. I made the decision to leave the elite private school that I was studying at I saw things around me with racism and sexism, and I just said, this doesn't make sense. This can't be all there is to it. And so I left school. I actually left before I graduated. I later progressed with my career, but I left at the age of 17, and I made the decision to go to Mexico to serve the Baha'i faith. And I had the incredible bounty and blessing of living with an indigenous family, a Baha'i family in Mexico, in a part called La Huasteca Potosina. And this was my period of service to the faith. And when I say I served, I basically received. Everything that I did there was a drop in the bucket compared to what I learned and what I walked away with. So in my particular journey, I was seeking certitude, searching for healing, asking God for his assistance. And this is a beautiful quote from Baha'u'llah. And he says, "Oh, my friend, listen with heart and soul to the songs of the Spirit and treasure them as thine own eyes." So essentially, listen to your heart, listen to your spirit, and this will guide you to your spiritual path. And again, kind of this idea of searching for answers, independently investigating truth. Baha'u'llah says, only when the lamp of search, of earnest striving, of longing desire, of passionate devotion is kindled within the seeker's heart, will the lights of knowledge and certitude envelop his being. meaning if you want to know the truth, do so with passion, with conviction, search it out. Look everywhere you can see. That everywhere you search will ultimately lead you to the one path if you're looking with an open and unbiased mind. Part of what happened that led me to the Baha'i faith was that I became extremely stricken with depression as a early adolescent and later in my adolescence, and it just made me say, what is the purpose? What is there? And it gave me this drive to find a path, make it make sense. And as I said, this gave me this idea that didn't matter how much I was suffering, there was a greater purpose behind the suffering. There was a path I was being pushed down, and that this allowed me to push through with the strength day after day, year after year. And this basically kept me alive. There's no doubt in my mind I would have taken my own life, or I probably would have succumbed to addiction to deal with the agony that I was in. And after many years of just, daily get through the day, try to find purpose, try to be of service, try to advance myself in my education so that I could serve, I gradually became aware of the tremendous gift of what I had lived through. And as well as the depression I struggled with, or alongside it, my mom passed away when I was in my early 20s, and I was really in the deepest part of my depression. And then she became ill, and then she passed away fairly quickly after she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And this was a prayer I used to say. I may cry, so I try not to. And she said that Baha'u'llah says, "Glory to thee, O my God, but for the tribulations which is sustained in thy path." I'm sorry, I can't read it. You can read it. So within that prayer, it says, this is so beautiful to me. It describes the agony that we go through when we lose someone or when we're struggling. "The companions of all who adore thee are the tears they shed, and the comforters of such as seek thee are the groans they utter. And the food of them who haste to meet thee is the fragments of their broken hearts." So one of the Baha'i beliefs is that when a pure soul passes on, that they have power and influence in the world. They release from their own passing this fresh impulse to humanity and this fresh power and gladness that can help us. And one of the darkest periods of my life, when I was literally walking away from school and from anything that could have, that I needed to advance myself and to serve, I prayed, and I just said that one day I was about to walk away from my career, from school, from everything. And I prayed one of the particularly potent Baha'i prayers. And the minute I finished that prayer, I just heard this word, fight. And it was just, that was my answer. You can't leave. You can't let it go. You have to fight, and you have to persist. And there's a particular story in the Baha'i faith that made this understanding of meaning and suffering make sense. And it was this story about a lover and his beloved and how they're separated, and he's searching for so many years for the woman that he loves. And he becomes more and more depressed as he cannot find her. He doesn't know where, perhaps this was the time in the past where women were cloistered and he didn't know where she was. And his depression overtook him. He couldn't sleep at night. He was in so much pain. Obviously, I related to this in so many levels, right? The doctors had no cure. People avoided him. He became so despairing, he lost all hope. And then one night, he just was in this throes of the suicidal thought that he wanted to escape. And he went out and he went to this described as the marketplace. And all of a sudden, this guard, they called a watchman in those days, started chasing him for no reason. And the man started running, and the watchman raced after him, trying to trap him. And this man, this lover seeking his beloved, says, "Surely this watchman is a tyrant of men seeking to harm me." And this watchman pursued him, and he barred every passage. And other watchmen, other guards, for whatever reason that this man couldn't understand, they all came together to chase him. And then finally he went down this alley and he came to a wall. There was nowhere to go. This was the wall. And with the intensity of his, the pain to scale this high wall, he scaled it, he jumped it, and he threw himself down to the garden on the other side. And in that garden, he found his beloved. And then the lover said, give glory to the watchman, because he aided this ailing soul to the heart's physician. And he said to himself, if I could have looked ahead, if I knew what was going to happen, I would have seen the injustice and the tyranny of those guards chasing you for no reason as justice. Because if I could see the end in the beginning, I would see peace and war and friendliness and anger. And this story was just spoke to my heart so much, because it said to me, whatever is happening, if it makes no sense, if it seems unjust, if it seems agonizing and you feel like you're running and can't escape, there is something of meaning that will happen because of that. And one of the beautiful things that has happened to me in my life is adopting my son. And I love this quote. This is actually on my mom's tombstone. And it says, love is the one means that ensureth true felicity both in this world and the next. Love is the light that guideth in darkness. It is the unique power that bindeth together the diverse elements of this material world, the supreme magnetic force that directeth the movements of the spheres in the celestial realm. In other words, gravity is the scientific expression of God's love. Everything that binds us together, human beings, our earth, our universe, is God's love, and that is gravity. And my son, I adopted after many, many years of agonizing infertility. And so this was just one of those beautiful blessings. How much time do I have? I want to make sure I'm not going too, am I way past my time?
I've got you to about 33 minutes, and I do see that there's some questions in there.
Okay.
And I just want to keep listening.
Well, I am happy to make this presentation available if people would like it. So let me just see if there's anything else I need to say that I haven't said. Let's see. So I'm just going to conclude with this, because this speaks to the religious scriptures of the past and how they share in the Bahai view. And we think about Christ's words, I have yet many things to say unto you, but you cannot bear them now. This idea that in the future, Christ's spirit would reveal this message that would unfold. And the Quran says something similar, that divine truth is set down in due and ascertainable measures. And in other words, in according to the capacity of people at that time. And the Bhagavad Gita, I come and go and come. When righteousness declines, Abharata, when wickedness is strong, I rise from age to age and take visible shape and move man with man, succoring the good, thrusting the evil back, and setting virtue on his seat again. The same echo of he comes in every age. So this is my last slide. So for centuries, followers of every religion have awaited this fuller measure of God's guidance in the world. And Baha'is believe that that is now in the time of fruition, and that this message of world unity and the unity of humankind is the fulfillment of that promise. So I'll conclude there, because I know I've taken up a lot of time and take any answers and questions.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, there's a bunch that have come in for you.
Okay, so let me stop my share. Q&A is where I look for them.
Yes, ma'am.
Sure. So there's a question about for some reason this individual didn't, from where he was from in Texas, they never ate milk and meat together. And is there a health reason for that? And that's
sorry, Julia. If you scroll down, there should be some
okay.
open questions.
Okay. Thank you. So quickly, I think this is the first one. With the imminent unification of humankind, will there be a new manifestation of God and a new messengers to facilitate that? We believe Baha'u'llah is that messenger for today's age, but absolutely this message continues to unfold. There will be further manifestations of God to guide us in this promised age. There's still going to be more guidance as we progress, and that will be an infinite progression from the Baha'i perspective. This person asked, just to clarify, do you believe that all those holy figures, Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, were perfect beings? If so, what would you say of the mistakes that Moses made, such as the killing of a slave handler, for instance? I think that's a brilliant question. Yes, they were all perfect beings. Perhaps once they received the intimations of their mission from God, and each of these manifestations had that time. If I remember correctly from the Bible, Moses, the burning bush, and Jesus, the dove. Muhammad, I believe the angel Gabriel spoke to him. So there was a time at which they received this knowledge of their mission. And so my personal response to Moses killing a slave handler would be perhaps that was one of the mysteries of God, that he maybe one of the tests for humanity, that this person received this message. Can you see that message beyond this mistake probably he made prior to receiving the intimation from God? So I guess what I try to say there is that within that imperfection, perhaps there is a wisdom. And yes, I do believe, and Baha'is do believe they were perfect beings. If we can make that distinction make sense. I hope that question responded to that. This person says, I absolutely believe men and women are viewed equally in the mind of God and equally important to the family. Can you clarify in what way do you personally believe men and women are equal? Do you believe there are specifically feminine and masculine roles, or do you believe that men and women can do things equally? And in what ways do you see men and women unequal in the law today? This is a great question. So Baha'is don't believe that we have to be equal, we must be the same. Being different, we can, just as human beings from different races and different cultural backgrounds, this doesn't take away from their fundamental equality. So yes, there can be specific feminine and masculine roles. Certainly, as I mentioned, women being the prerequisite to peace on earth basically speaks to our unique role as mothers, as nurturers, as facilitators of communication. I mean, these are things that women are strong in. So that to me is believing that men and women are equal and yet different. And in what way do I see men and women unequal in the law today? And perhaps in the law of the United States, there's no mandate for us to be unequal, but we can certainly see that we don't have, on the political level, on the international scale, we've not had the influence of women the way we should have. So I would say that even for Western societies. And obviously in the law of many other places in the world, there's not equality granted. Let's see, this person says, do Baha'i adherents retain a concept of an expected future Mahdi involved with bringing about a unified humanity and age of peace? And that's what I mentioned earlier. Absolutely. There is a future promised one who will come after Baha'u'llah. And this person says, I love the idea that true science and true religion agree with each other. I'm a student of electrical engineering and physics and have found so many parallels with religious principles. I love that. And they say, I am wondering if you could tell more about how your religion sees God and the principles of science and nature. Why is this idea so important? I can just speak to, as an individual observing, meditating nature, how many truths can you see? You look at water, the life-giving force. It cleanses us, it nurtures us. We must have it. And look how it's malleable, it moves, it doesn't fight against things. It shapes and yet it doesn't it accepts a shape, right? So it's almost like this idea of us as human beings without having conflict. How much more life can we bring to each other? I hope I've answered that. That was a quick answer, but yeah, I think looking at science, and science in the broader sense, the investigation of reality, as we learn about light, for example, we learn about the spectrum of light and all the scientific principles of light, and then we think of these manifestations as being light givers. How much more do we know about what being a light giver would mean if we understand all the capacities of light? So I think that perhaps is the way that we think religion is illumined by science. I'll pause there not to intrude upon the next speaker's time, because I think that, oh, excuse me, what are your main books for studying the Baha'i teachings? There are so many, and this is one of the beauties of the Baha'i revelation. There's books upon books upon books. I've not even read them all. And Bahai.org has infinite information about that, and you can find those books there. All right, I will pause there. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you.
Thanks, Julia. Speaking of books, I did have a comment. My oldest daughter, has been reading Soul Boom, Why the World Needs a Spiritual Revolution, written by Rainn Wilson from The Office. He's trying to spark a discussion about the spiritual tools that we can use to further the maturity and spiritual wisdom of wisdom and growth on a global scale. How do you feel that this book has been received by the Baha'i community?
Rainn Wilson is beloved by the Bahai community. We love him. He has so much, his humor, his insight. So yes, this is a very well received book by the Bahai community, and he's a known speaker at Bahai events, and as I said, very beloved. So I think we would embrace that wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julia.
Thank you.
I do see a lot of comments are asking about how to get your slide presentation, so we'll talk later and
Okay.
figure out how to share that.
Sure.
All right, it's time for our last speaker, Denver C. Snuffer Jr. He is an attorney living in Sandy, Utah. He converted to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 1973 when he was 19 years old. He was excommunicated exactly 40 years later for writing a book called Passing the Heavenly Gift. He is an avid author and historian, writing numerous books. Most recently, he wrote The Testimony of Jesus, Past, Present, and Promise. Welcome, Denver.
Can you hear me?
We can hear
Okay. I used to serve on a LDS stake high council before I was excommunicated. And as a high council speaker, I had to have what we called accordion talks ready. They could expand if I got a lot of time, or they could contract if there was no time left. It's 12:41. This is scheduled to conclude at 12:40. And so I was taught by my mother to be courteous of others and of their time. So I'm not going to keep people here for a while. I'm just going to add one concluding thought. In scriptures that we accept, or a version of them that we've accepted that has been converted into language that is more modern, I want to use that more modern version. We have in our scriptures this thought: the Lord gives to every nation from their own people, using their own language, teachers delivering his message that he decides is relevant for them. Therefore, we should trust that the Lord is wise enough to give everyone to the truth appropriate for them. And I think what we heard today in the conference really is a manifestation of that scriptural principle. And with that, it's 3 minutes over the promised time that I put up on my own website that this conference would conclude. And so I'm disinclined to go further. I think it's been adequate to this point. And so I really don't think I want to impose upon people, particularly since I also have other things that I was planning to go and take care of shortly after 12:40, and we are now at 12:43. So thank everyone for participating who went before me. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Jill.
Thanks, Denver. So, of course, we don't have any questions for you that had come in. So I'd like to thank all of this year's speakers. I enjoyed this discussion tremendously. Now we are going to have LJ give us the closing prayer for world peace, and then I'll close us out. LJ, thanks for staying on to share this prayer with us.
Hi, thank you. I will be brief, and as a method to dedicate all the accumulated virtue we have created here, I will read just a few verses from Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Buddhist Master Shantideva, and the end of which we can all individually dedicate or give all the merit we have accumulated to the health and happiness of all living beings. Therefore, in whatever I do, I will never cause harm to others, and whenever anyone encounters me, may it never be meaningless for them. Whether those who encounter me generate faith or anger, may it always be the cause of their fulfilling all their wishes. May all those who harm me, whether verbally or by other means, and those who otherwise insult me, thereby create the cause to attain enlightenment. May I become a protector for the protectorless, a guide for those who travel on the road, and for those who wish to cross the water. May I become a boat, a ship, or a bridge. May I become an island for those seeking dry land, a lamp for those needing light, a place of rest for those who desire one, and a servant for those needing service. To benefit all living beings, may I become a treasury of wealth, powerful mantras, potent medicine, a wish-fulfilling tree, and a wish-granting cow. Just like the great elements such as earth, and like eternal space, may I become the basis from which everything arises for sustaining the life of countless living beings. And until they have passed beyond sorrow, may I sustain all forms of life throughout the realms of living beings that reach out to the ends of space.
Thank you so much, LJ.
Thank you.
That was beautiful. If you or someone you know would like to participate with us next year, please reach out with their information and I will get in contact with them. You can reach me at unityinhumanity@gmail.com. Excuse me, unityinhumanitycelebration@gmail.com. I'd like to thank everyone who helped support the conference this year, and send a special thanks over to Chris Van Kampen in Japan, who helped with the social media, to Josh Maskovich in Laos, who helped with the Zoom, and over to Cameron Larson in Idaho, who will help me get this edited and posted for us. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope to see you next year.